Welcome to a new video. My channel is called Echoes of History. Tonight, we wander far back in time, not into the lives of kings or generals, but into the quiet, unrecorded rhythm of ordinary people. History is rarely lived in battles or decrees. It is lived in the slow turning of days, in the footsteps of men and women whose names we will never know. So let us drift together into the long silence of the past, and imagine, as the night grows heavy, what life once was. Village, the air is cool, and the horizon is faintly blue with the promise of dawn. Somewhere in the dark, a rooster has already stirred, calling out to a village that lies tucked between fields and forest. The houses here are simple, their walls of timber and clay, their roofs patched with thatch. Thin trails of smoke rise where embers have been coaxed back into fire. Inside, families begin to wake. The peasant's day does not wait for comfort. It waits for work, and it begins early. A man bends to pull on his worn boots, stiff with yesterday's mud. His wife moves quietly across the single room, stirring what little food is left for breakfast. The children murmur in their sleep, curled close together for warmth, their breath rising in soft clouds against the chill. The smell of smoke mixes with the scent of damp earth and wool. There is no rush, yet there is no pause either. Each gesture is practiced, repeated from childhood, and repeated for as long as memory holds. Eating, walking into the fields. Outside, the ground is wet with dew. The first steps are heavy, but they soon fall into rhythm. Across the lane, other doors open. Neighbors nod to one another with the quiet understanding of shared labor. There are no long conversations. Words are saved for necessity. It is enough simply to walk side by side in the dim light, the silence filled with the caw of distant crows and the creak of cartwheels. The fields stretch wide and uneven, their furrows. Soil that has been turned and turned again through the years. Tools lean against stone walls. Hoes, spades, sickles, each worn smooth by many hands. The men and women bend low, pressing their weight into the earth. There is no romance in this work. It is repetitive, back-breaking, and endless, but it is also survival. The soil must yield or there will be hunger. Hours pass, measured not by clocks but by the sun's slow climb. Sweat gathers along the brow, and muscles ache with the familiar. Strain. Every stone pulled from the ground, every furrow cleared, every sheaf bound is a small step toward food on the table. Children run along the edges of the fields, sometimes playing, sometimes carrying water, sometimes scaring birds away from the crops. Their laughter rises and falls, light against the steady rhythm of tools striking earth. At midday there is a pause. Shadows fall short beneath the blazing sun, and the workers gather in the sparse shade. Meals are unwrapped. Hunks of coarse bread, sometimes dipped in ale to soften their hardness, perhaps flavored with onion or herbs. On lucky days there might be cheese or dried meat left over from a feast. They sit in circles, chewing slowly, their voices quiet. Talk drifts from weather to harvest, from rumors of distant markets to local gossip. Someone has seen a wolf near the woods. Someone else wonders if the Lord will demand more taxes this year. These words are carried on the wind, spoken without filling the space between mouthfuls. As the afternoon stretches long, the fields call them back. The air grows heavy and the flies are thick, but the work continues. Shoulders bend again and hands return to the soil. The cycle of labor is relentless. Yet within it, there is a strange kind of order, almost a peace. The peasant does not imagine a life free of toil. He imagines only that tomorrow will be no worse than today, that the crops will ripen, that the weather will be kind. Sa are small, but they are constant, and in them lies endurance. Evening arrives slowly. The light softens. The edges of the village glow with orange and gold. The people return in weary lines, their footsteps dragging in the dirt paths. They carry what little they have gathered, bundles of sticks for fire, baskets of grain, sometimes nothing but their exhaustion. The village hums with the sounds of return. doors closing, animals calling, parts clattering as they are set over flames. Inside the homes, families gather around the hearth. Flames leap and smoke drifts upward through the thatch. Shadows stretch across walls of mud and straw. Meals are small, but they are shared. A thin soup, perhaps, ladled into wooden bowls, bread torn into pieces and passed hand to hand. There is comfort in this ritual, in the nearness of family, in the warmth of fire. Conversation turns again to simple things, to neighbors, to stories half believed, to warnings about spirits said to roam the night. Children listen, wide-eyed, as their elders speak of wandering lights in the forest, of creatures that lurk in the dark, of saints and miracles. The line between faith and superstition is thin, and perhaps it does not matter. When the meal is done, the village grows quieter. Outside, the fields lie still, the forest pressing close around them. A dog barks once, then falls silent. The stars begin to prick the sky, faint at first, then brighter, countless, endless. The peasants lie down. Pallets, their bodies heavy, their eyes already closing. The day has ended as it always ends, and tomorrow will come again. But sleep does not erase the weight of life. It only softens it for a while. In the quiet of night, a man may dream not of riches or glory, but of simple mercies, of bread that is not stale, of weather that is not cruel, of children who grow into strength. These are the dreams that sustain him. These are the foundations upon which centuries are built, though will ever write his name. And so, beneath the silence of the medieval sky, the village rests. Its story is not loud, not filled with spectacle, but it is history nonetheless. A history woven not from battles, but from countless ordinary days, days of labor, days of hunger, days of hope, and days of quiet endurance. Each breath taken in those huts, each step across those fields, is part of a chain that stretches to us. In their anonymity lies their legacy. In their sigh. The night deepens over the village. Outside the houses, the air is cool and damp, carrying the scent of wood smoke and tilled soil. The paths are empty, though in the distance a dog still stirs, its ears pricking at the faint cry of an owl from the woods. The fields lie in shadow, the furrows' dark ribbons stretching away into the horizon. Beyond them, the forest looms, ancient and quiet, its trees whispering in the faintest breeze. Inside the homes, bodies shift on straw beds, the murmurs of sleep punctuated by the occasional cough or the restless cry of a child. The firelight fades, and in its fading lies the surrender of another day. But sleep is never without its unease. There is always the thought of tomorrow, of what it will demand. Rain might come and spoil the harvest, or it may not come at all and withhold life from the earth. A message might arrive from the manor, a summons for work not of the fields, but of the Lord's choosing. The needs of the powerful weigh heavily o'er the powerless, and though the peasants rest, they rest knowing their lives are not wholly their own. When dawn comes again, it does not ask if they are ready. The first rooster calls, and the faint glow of morning pushes against the darkness. Once more, shutters creak open, and the day unfolds as if it were a mirror of the last. A man rises, his muscles aching with the echo of yesterday's work. His wife tends the embers, coaxing flame from smoke. She moves with quiet efficiency, her hands practiced, her mind already turning to tasks awaiting her, fetching water, spinning wool, tending the garden that grows behind the cottage. The children stir, rubbing their eyes, their small limbs stiff from the chill. Water is drawn from the well, the rope squeaking as it lowers the bucket into the depths. The sound echoes faintly, a reminder that beneath the ground lies the lifeblood of the village. Neighbors greet one another in nods, gestures that carry both familiarity and weariness. Few words are spoken, but in the quiet acknowledgement lies a bond. They are all caught in the same rhythm, the same cycle of labor and survival. The men turn again to the fields. This morning they carry with them plows harnessed to oxen, slow but steady beasts whose broad shoulders press against the wooden yokes. The oxen move with patience, their hooves sinking into the damp soil, their breaths steaming in the cool air. Behind them, the earth splits, furrows opening in dark, neat lines. Hard work, even with the animals. The plow resists, catching on stones and roots, demanding constant effort. Yet the furrows must be laid and the soil must be prepared. The women, too, carry their burdens. Some walk to the stream, washing clothes upon flat stones, their hands red from the cold water. The sound of fabric striking stone echoes like a rhythm, mingling with the laughter of children nearby. Others tend small gardens, crouched low as they weed and water, coaxing earth that will someday soften the taste of bread. Still others spin wool, their spindles twisting slowly as fibers gather, thread by thread. Their work is quieter than the men's, but no less vital. Without it, there would be no cloth, no warmth, no garments to endure the winter. By midday, the village hums with many small labors. A carpenter hammers in the shade of his hut, shaping wood into a tool handle. A blacksmith at the edge of the village strikes metal against anvil, sparks flying as bends iron into nails, into hinges, into the small but necessary pieces of life. The air smells of smoke, of sweat, of earth turned and overturned. The children play where they can, though even their games are tied to labor. They mimic their fathers, dragging sticks through dirt as if plowing. They mimic their mothers, carrying stones in baskets, laughing at the weight before dropping them with a thud. Childhood is brief, but in its brevity there is joy, and their laughter carries lightly. Through the village lanes, a counterpoint to the steady thrum of work. As the sun lowers, the oxen are led back, their work done for the day. Their hides are damp with sweat, their breaths heavy. They are brushed and fed, for they too are precious. Without them, the work would be heavier still. The men's shoulders ache, their hands raw from rope and handle, yet the sight of neat furrows, dark and ready, brings a quiet satisfaction. This is progress. This is survival. Evening settles once more. Fires are lit, and the scent of cooking drifts through the air. Tonight there may be pottage, thickened with beans or peas, flavored with herbs gathered from the forest edge. Bowls are passed, wooden spoons lifted, and silence broken only by the sound of eating, of small murmurs between family members. Outside, the night grows darker, the stars gathering in the sky like countless eyes. After the meal, there are moments of stillness. Some sit by the fire, their faces glowing in the flickering light. A woman spins wool as she listens to her husband recount a story he heard from a passing traveler. A child leans against his mother's shoulder, eyes half closed, listening without fully understanding. The stories are not grand. They are fragments of rumor, of superstition, of memory. A wolf seen near the edge of the woods. A neighbor who swears he heard bells at midnight where no church stands. Tales that blur the line between truth and imagination. Tales that fill the silence and ease the long hours before sleep. And again, as the flames burn low, as the embers glow faintly in the hearth, the village rests. The cycle is unbroken. The days are long, the nights short, and the rhythm endless. Yet in the very repetition lies meaning. Each day added to the next is a thread in a fabric that stretches through centuries. Each nameless life adds weight to history, even if history never winter approaches slowly, but its signs are already felt. The air once with the hum of insects and the warmth of the sun, grows sharper with each passing dawn. Leaves curl and drop from the trees, gathering in damp piles along the edges of the lanes. The fields, once alive with labor, stand bare now, their furrows dark and silent, waiting for the frost. Life in the village bends to the season, for everything bends to the season. The peasants' work changes. Where once they spent long hours bent over soil, they now turn inward toward tasks that prepare them for cold. Firewood is gathered in great bundles, stacked against the walls of cottages. It must be enough to last, though it never is. Clothes are patched and mended, wool spun into thicker cloth, leather softened and sewn into shoes that might endure the mud and snow. Food is dried, salted, or stored as best as possible. Grain is measured and guarded carefully. Each sack of flour is more than food. It is survival, counted day by day through the long dark. The mornings are colder now. Frost. On the edges of windows, turning every breath into a faint mist. Families huddle closer to the hearth, the single room of the cottage crowded with bodies and the smell of smoke. Breakfast is no longer bread and cheese, for cheese is scarce. It is porridge, thin and plain, cooked over the fire in iron pots. Children blow on their bowls to cool the steam, their faces pale in the dim light. Outside, the work continues, though it changes in nature. Men repair fences, tighten roofs, patch. Against the wind, women carry baskets of kindling, their shawls drawn tight against the chill. The sound of chopping wood echoes through the village, steady and sharp, punctuating the silence of the cold air. Oxen, no longer ploughing, are led to barns, their breath rising in great white clouds. The animals are precious. Their health is guarded as carefully as the health of family. At night, the cottages glow faintly, tiny islands of warmth in a sea of frost. Inside, families gather even more closely than before. The fire is their center, their shield against the creeping cold. Shadows flicker across the walls as stories are told longer now, for the nights themselves are longer. Tales of saints, of miracles, of spirits in the dark. The children listen wide-eyed, their faces lit by firelight, as their parents spin stories half believed, half feared. The days shorten, and soon the first snow falls. It arrives quietly, a soft blanket that covers the fields and muffles the village in. Silence. The world feels smaller now, enclosed in white. Footsteps crunch as villagers move along the narrow paths, their breath rising in steady clouds. Work becomes heavier, for everything takes longer in the snow. Water must be carried from the frozen well, firewood split more quickly, food stretched more thinly. Hunger begins to whisper, not loudly, but enough to be felt in the pit of the stomach. Meals are smaller, portions halved. Children learn early the meaning of restraint. Illness comes with winter. Coughs echo in the cottages, fevers burn through the week. There is no physician here, only herbs gathered in summer, dried and stored in small bundles. A woman lays willow bark in hot water for pain. Another crushes garlic and mixes it with honey for a cough. These remedies may help or they may not. The people endure, for there is little choice. Life is not about comfort, it is about survival day after day through the turning of the seasons. And yet, even in the hearth days, there are moments of warmth beyond the hearth. A festival is held when Christmas comes, marked not by abundance but by togetherness. The church bells call them, their sound carrying through the crisp air. Inside, the people gather, their breath clouding in the cold, their voices rising in song. The celebration is not grand, but it is a respite, a pause in the relentless struggle. They share what little they have, exchanging greetings, laughter, and hope. For a brief time, the hunger and the cold are forgotten, and in their place is community. The snow lingers for weeks, then months. Food dwindles, and the sacks of grain grow lighter. Every loaf of bread is cut thinner, every pot of pottage stretched farther with water. Hunger becomes constant, a dull ache carried through the day and into the night. The children grow quieter, their play subdued, their faces thinner. The men's hands crack and bleed from the cold, the women's fingers stiffen as they mend and spin by firelight. It is endurance and nothing more. And yet always the wheel of time turns. The days lengthen again, almost without notice. The snow begins to melt, dripping from the roofs, running in small streams through the village paths. The ground softens, the air warms. The peasants step out into the thaw, blinking against the new light. Once more the cycle begins. The fields, long silent, call them back. Tools are lifted, soil is broken, seeds are sown. Another year begins, another rhythm takes them. Life is not measured in decades or in dynasties. It is measured in seasons, in harvests, in winters survived. Each cycle is another chapter in a story they do not write, but which echoes nonetheless through time. Their names will fade, their faces forgotten, but their days, their endless, ordinary, necessary days, are the threads from which history itself is woven. Spring does not arrive all at once. It creeps slowly, almost shyly, into the lives of the villagers. First there is thaw, rivulets of meltwater tracing paths through the hardened lanes, soaking boots, turning the earth into a heavy, clinging mud. Then there are the sounds, the trickle of streams breaking free of their icy shells, the song of birds returning to branches still bare, the low hum of bees searching for the earliest blossoms. Each sign is small, but together they whisper of relief, of a promise that winter's grip is loosening. The people of the village emerge cautiously into this new season. Their bodies are thin, worn by hunger and cold, their faces lined with the strain of endurance. Yet with each step into the softening earth, with each breath of air that carries the scent of damp soil instead of smoke and frost, there is a faint renewal. Life begins again because it must. The fields are their first concern. They stand once more at the edges, surveying the ground that lies before them. The soil is clotted and heavy, but beneath it lies the potential for life. Men lead ox. More, the creak of wooden yokes and the groan of plowshares cutting into damp earth filling the morning air. The furrows are uneven at first, as if the land itself resists, but with persistence, the soil yields. Seeds are sown by careful hands, cast into furrows with a rhythm practiced since childhood. Each seed is a hope, a wager placed against the whims of weather and fate. Women tend the kitchen gardens behind their homes, coaxing herbs and vegetables from the earth. Children scat, gathering kindling, watching over animals, sometimes scaring away birds from the newly sown fields. Their voices rise again in laughter, thin but genuine, as they chase one another across the muddy lanes. After months of silence and weariness, the sound of children playing is as much a sign of spring as the budding branches. By midday, the air is warmer, though the ground is still wet. Families gather near the fields to share food, bread, always bread, though now softer, fresher, baked from the last of the stored grain. If they are fortunate, a bit of dried meat or fish accompanies it, or eggs gathered from hens newly laying. They eat together in the open air, the sun on their faces, the warmth seeping slowly into their bones. For a moment, it feels as if the harshness of winter is nothing but a memory, though its shadow lingers in their thinness, in the way their eyes search the sky for clouds, for signs of too much or too little rain. As spring deepens, work shifts again. We must be pulled from gardens, ditches cleared for water, animals driven to pasture. The rhythm of labor quickens, not with the desperation of winter survival, but with the urgency of planting and preparation. The peasants know that the months ahead will decide much, whether the harvest will be full, whether the stores will last another winter. Their toil is heavy, but it is laced with anticipation. And then comes summer. The fields, once bare, now ripple with green. Wheat and barley sway in the breeze, their heads thickening with grain. The air is filled with the hum of insects, the chirping of birds. The village itself feels more alive, its lanes busier, its people more energetic. Children run barefoot, their laughter carrying far into the fields. The blacksmith's hammer rings out more often, the carpenter shapes wood into carts and tools, the women spin wool beneath the shade of trees, their spindles turning endlessly in their hands. Summer is a season of both labor and life. The days are long and the work is constant, yet there is a sense of abundance in the air. Meals are larger now, richer with vegetables and herbs. Milk flows more freely, cheese is made and stored, honey gathered from hives. The villagers eat more, laugh more, speak more freely beneath the sun. Evenings are spent outside, the glow of the fire replaced by the glow of twilight, the air filled with the mingled sense of cooking, of grass, of warm earth. And yet, even in summer, the work never ceases. Weeds threaten the crops, storms can flatten them, drought can wither them. Each day brings both hope and risk. The peasants rise early, work steadily, rest briefly, and continue, their lives bound tightly to the cycles of the earth. Their hands are brown with soil, their backs bent, but their hearts beat in rhythm with the land itself. When autumn arrives, it brings both relief and demand. The fields, heavy with grain, must be harvested quickly before storms or frost claim them. Men work side by side, sickles flashing in the sun, bundles of stalks gathered and bound, carried to barns and granaries. The air is filled with the rustle of straw, the smell of chaff, the steady murmur of voices urging one another to keep pace. It is exhausting work, but it carries a kind of joy. The barns fill, the stores grow, and with them grows the certainty of survival. Bread will be baked through winter, pottage cooked, fires lit. For a time, the peasants can breathe easier, knowing that their toil has borne fruit. Festivals mark the harvest, simple but heartfelt. Ale is brewed, songs are sung, dances circle the village green. Children watch with wide eyes as their parents laugh and move in ways rarely seen in the grind of daily labor. The cycle of the year is complete, but it does not end. Winter will come again as it always does, and spring will follow as it must. The rhythm is endless, but within its repetition lies meaning, security, even beauty. For the pet is not a grand tale told in books or monuments. It is this rhythm of seed and harvest, of hunger and feast, of cold and warmth. A rhythm that carried them, nameless though they were, through centuries, until their forgotten footsteps became the foundation upon which the world was built. The harvest festival approaches with the turning of the leaves. Summer's green deepens into gold and red, and the village prepares for one of the few times in the year when life feels less like endurance, more like celebration. It is not a festival of abundance by the standards of kings or nobles. There are no silken banners, no feasts that spill across endless tables. But for the peasants, it is a moment to breathe, to laugh, to give thanks that the fields have yielded enough to carry them through another winter. The church bell calls the villagers together. Its slow toll drifts over the fields, summoning men, women, and children from their tasks. They gather in the village green, a patch of earth trodden by generations, bordered by cottages and barns. The air is filled with the scent of ale brewing, of bread fresh from ovens, of roasted meat, a luxury saved for such occasions. For once, the larder is open without fear, the food shared more freely, as though generosity itself could bring luck for the seasons ahead. There are songs, simple and repetitive, sung in voices rough from work, but strong with unity. The melodies have no composer, no origin that anyone passed down like stories, like tools, like the very soil, ancient, familiar, belonging to all and to none. Children clap their hands and dance in circles, their bare feet pounding the earth in rhythm. Young men and women laugh shyly, glancing at one another as they join the dances, their cheeks flushed with more than just ale. For some, this day may mark the beginning of courtship, the weaving together of two lives into one. The festival stretches into the evening. Fires are lit, their glow, painting faces in warm orange light. Shadows dance across the cottages, across the faces of neighbors who, for this brief night, set aside the burdens of labor. Jokes are told, stories recounted, not the heavy tales of lords and wars, but the lighter stories of mischievous spirits, of animals outwitting men, of neighbors remembered for their quirks long after their names are forgotten. Laughter echoes, rich and surprising, a sound rarely heard in such measure. For one night, the alive in a way that carries it through the darker days to come. But even as festivals brighten life, the market brings its own form of excitement. A few times a year, traders pass through, their carts heavy with goods from towns and cities beyond the horizon. Their arrival is an event, the sound of wheels on stone drawing villagers to the lanes. The traders bring cloth dyed in colors unseen in the village, spices that sting the nose, tools sharper and stronger than those forged by the low. Smith, they bring stories, too, tales of distant lands, of wars fought far away, of rulers whose decrees ripple down to even the smallest cottage. The villagers crowd around, wide-eyed, fingers brushing against fabrics they cannot afford, breathing in the scents of herbs and resins they do not know by name. For most, these wonders remain out of reach, too costly to trade for the grain or wool they have to offer. Yet even to see them is enough, a reminder that the world beyond them exists, vast, strange, filled with things they cannot imagine. Sometimes a purchase is made, a small mirror of polished metal, a comb of carved bone, a knife sharper than any owned before. These objects, though simple, carry weight. They become treasured possessions, passed down from parent to child, tied to memory as much as to use. The market leaves as suddenly as it arrives, the carts creaking into the distance, but the echoes of its presence linger long after, folded into stories. Firelight. Not all gatherings are joyous. There are days when the villagers are summoned to the manor, when the Lord demands labor beyond the fields they tend for themselves. They carry stones, mend walls, dig ditches, their strength bent to works that serve not their own families, but the power that looms above them. These days are endured rather than lived, the peasants' eyes lowered, their words few. Yet even here they find small consolations, the companionship of one another, the knowledge that burdens shared are burdens softened. And then there are holy days when the church becomes the center of life. The villagers gather in their rough woolen clothes, kneeling on cold floors as the priest intones words in Latin, words most do not understand but feel deeply nonetheless. The rituals are steady, dependable, a rhythm as sure as the seasons. The flicker of candles, the scent of incense, the echo of chants, all of it weaves a spell of meaning that lifts their lives from toil into something greater, something eternal. For a moment, their hunger and hardship are framed as part of a divine order, their suffering not meaningless but woven into the tapestry of salvation. So the year turns, marked not by calendars but by cycles of labor, of worship, of small celebrations. The peasants live not in grand events but in countless small moments, in the rhythm of hammers and plows, of laughter and prayer, of stories told and retold by the fire. Their lie. Often harsh, sometimes brightened by joy, always carried by endurance. And though they vanish into the silence of centuries, though their names are lost and their faces fade, their days remain. In every stone laid, in every furrow turned, in every loaf of bread baked from grain sown and reaped, they live still. Their voices may not echo loudly, but they echo nonetheless, carried softly through time, waiting for us to listen in the quiet hours of night. Winter returns, and with it the quiet. Heaviness that settles over the village. The warmth of festivals and the bustle of markets feel like distant memories as the days shorten and the nights stretch endlessly. Snow drapes the fields once more, erasing the lines of furrows, covering the cottages in pale silence. The paths become narrow, trodden only where necessity drives footsteps, each crunch of boots a reminder of the cold that presses in on all sides. Inside the cottages, life contracts. The single room becomes existence, the hearth its beating heart. Families gather close, wrapped in layers of wool and patched cloth, their breath misting in the chill air that seeps through cracks in the walls. The fire burns, but never hot enough, never long enough. Each log placed upon the flames is weighed against how many remain in the stack outside. Every ember is precious. Meals grow smaller as winter deepens. Grain, once measured out in careful portions, dwindles. Bread becomes thinner, stretched with whatever can be found, acorns ground into flour, roots dug from the frozen earth. Pottage simmers in the pot, thin and watery, flavored with little more than what herbs were dried in summer. The smell of cooking fills the room nonetheless, bringing comfort even when the taste is plain. Children eat quietly, their eyes watching the bowls as if hoping more might appear. Illness stirs in the close air. Coughs echo in the night. Fevers burn in the straw beds. Herbs are steeped in hot water. Compresses lay. Upon foreheads, prayers whispered over the sick. Some recover, their strength returning slowly. Others do not, and their absence lingers in the silence of the cottage, in the empty space by the fire. Death is not a stranger here. It is part of the rhythm, mourned but accepted, its weight carried like every other burden. Yet even in the hardest days, there are sparks of light. A child's laughter breaks through the silence when snow is gathered at the door, shaped into crude figures, their twig. Arms reaching toward the sky. Neighbors share what little they can. A handful of beans, a strip of salted meat, a bundle of sticks for the fire. In these small gestures lies the strength of the village, the web of care that holds it together against the cold. The church bell still tolls on holy days, its sound carrying through the frozen air. The villagers walk through snow, their breath steaming, their footsteps leaving dark prints in the white. Inside the church, the air is scarcely warmer. Yet the flicker of candles and the sound of voices raised together bring comfort that the hearth alone cannot. The priest speaks of endurance, of the trials of life as a passage toward eternity. The people bow their heads, some in faith, others in weary habit, but all in search of meaning for the hardship they endure. As the weeks drag on, time feels slower. Days blur into one another, marked only by the lighting of fires, the drawing of water, the scraping of bowls. Yet beneath the surface, life stirs. The earth itself sleeps, but it does not die. Beneath the snow, seeds lie waiting, roots cling to life. And as surely as winter has come, so too will spring return. When at last the first thaw comes, it is almost unnoticed. A drip of water from the eaves, a patch of earth dark against the white, the distant call of a bird not heard for months. Slowly the snow recedes, and the village begins to breathe again. Doors open more often, the air smells less of smoke and more. Oxen are led out once more, their hooves squelching in the mud, their shoulders ready to press into the yoke. The fields are wet, heavy with the memory of frost, but the peasants' hands are eager. Tools are lifted, seeds are carried, and once again the cycle begins. Hope rises with the thaw, fragile but persistent. Each furrow turned, each seed cast, is an act of faith that the land will provide, that life will continue, that the wheel will turn as it always has. And so it does. The season pass, the rhythm repeats, and the village endures. The people live not for glory, not for riches, but for survival, for family, for the quiet dignity of lives bound to the earth. Their names may never be written, their stories never told, yet in their endless labor lies the foundation of all that came after. Their footsteps fade into the soil, their voices into the air, but their days echo on, whispered through time, carried in the silence of history. The cycle of the year carries the village forward, and with it come the subtler rhythms of life, those not bound to fields and seasons, but to the passage of generations. Children grow taller, their limbs stronger, their play more serious as work begins to replace games. A boy who once ran barefoot along the lanes now shoulders a hoe, his back bent beside his father's. A girl who once carried sticks for the fire now spins wool, her hands quick and certain as her mother's once were. Childhood fades quickly here, pressed thin by the weight of necessity. Yet in their eyes there is still brightness, the laughter of youth slipping through the cracks of duty. Marriages are woven quietly into this rhythm, often arranged between families who have long known one another. A young man, strong in the fields, glances shyly at a young woman as they kneel side by side in the church. A match is whispered between parents, confirmed with the exchange of modest gifts, a sack of grain, a goat, a small plot of land. The wedding day itself is simple, a blessing from the priest, a shared meal with neighbors, a night of dancing by the fire. It is not grandeur that binds them, but the knowledge that survival is easier together, that life is lighter when burdens are shared. Children soon follow, their cries filling the cottages, their presence both joy and responsibility. Mothers rise in the night to soothe them, fathers carve toys from scraps of wood when work allows. The infants are swaddled in cloth, carried on their mothers' backs as tasks continue. Their lives begin as they will go on, entwined with labor, sustained by the village's fragile web of care. Some survive, their laughter growing stronger with each season. Others do not, their brief existence mourned in silence, their memory folded into the rhythm of life that moves inexorably forward. The elders, too, hold their place. Bent with years, their hands twisted with age, they no longer work the fields as once they did. Instead, they sit by the hearth, voices carrying the memory of times long past. They speak of harsh winters, of bountiful harvests, of lords now gone and wars now ended. Their stories blend truth and embellishment, but they are listened to nonetheless, for they are threads that bind the past to the present. Children gather at their feet, eyes wide, half in wonder, half in fear, as tales of spirits and miracles tumble from cracked lips. Seasons pass, and with them come the occasional disruptions, storms that flatten field, droughts that crack the soil, sickness that sweeps through cottages. These are endured as all things are endured, with quiet resilience. Neighbors step in to help one another, for the survival of the village is bound together. A barn roof destroyed by wind is rebuilt not by one family, but by many hands. A child left orphaned is taken in, folded into another household without question. Life here is fragile, but it is sustained by the strength of community, by the unspoken knowledge. Survives alone. Pilgrims sometimes pass through, their cloaks dusty, their staffs worn smooth by miles of walking. They speak of holy places, of relics and miracles, their words carrying both wonder and warning. The villagers listen, wide-eyed, as stories of distant lands and sacred journeys drift into their cottages. For most, such travels are impossible, yet the very idea of them opens a window onto a world far larger than the fields and forests they know. The pilgrims, bread and blessings, and then move on, leaving behind a trail of whispered awe. Occasionally, darker visitors come, soldiers marching beneath banners, their boots heavy on the lanes, their demands sharp and inescapable. The villagers bow their heads, offer what they must, grain or livestock taken as tax or tithe. The presence of power is felt not only in these moments, but in every day, for the Lord's rights stretch over their land, their work, their very lives. Yet even under this weight, the peasants endure. They return to their fields, to their hearths, to the rhythm that carries them forward. And always the seasons turn. Spring brings the promise of renewal, summer the fullness of labor, autumn the relief of harvest, winter the trial of endurance. Each cycle carries with it both hardship and hope, both loss and joy. The years accumulate quietly, marked not by grand events, but by the steady repetition of ordinary days. In the end, the life of the village is not one, but of constancy. It is the constancy of footsteps across soil, of hands bent to tools, of voices raised in song around a fire. It is a life humble in its detail, immense in its persistence. For while their names vanish into silence, their days do not. Their days remain, echoing softly, the unseen foundation upon which all of history stands. The turn of the century, though never marked in their own words, creeps silently through the lives of the villagers. For them, time is not years or numbers, but by the rhythm of harvests, the rising and falling of seasons. Yet still, change comes slow and subtle, like the shifting of a river's course that only becomes clear after many lifetimes. A new tool arrives, carried from town by a trader, an iron plowshare, sharper and heavier than the wooden ones worn thin by years of use. It is costly, more than a single family could ever afford, but the village bands together, pooling grain, wool, and coin. The tool becomes, passed from field to field, its steel biting more deeply into the soil than wood ever could. Its presence marks a small step, yet it is a step forward, easing the burden by a fraction. The villagers marvel at it, not as nobles marvel at gilded treasures, but as laborers marvel at a thing that makes survival a little more certain. The church, too, grows more present in their lives. A new bell is cast, its tone deeper, carrying farther across the fields. It marks not only hours, breaking the day into smaller rhythms, tying labor to sound. The priest, older now, leans heavily on his staff as he speaks of salvation and judgment, of lives lived humbly as a path to eternity. The people bow their heads, not always in understanding, but in reverence. For them, the church is not merely stone walls and sermons. It is the anchor of their world, the place where births are blessed, marriages sanctified, deaths mourned. As the village ages, so too do its. Replace the old. Children once carried on hips now carry their own infants. The cottages stand as they always have, patched and repaired, the thatch renewed each season, the walls leaning but unbroken. Smoke rises from chimneys as it has for generations, marking lives lived steadily, without interruption, in the shadow of time's endless march. The market grows larger in the nearby town, and more villagers begin to walk the miles to reach it. They carry with them what they have. Eggs, bundles of wool, parts of honey. They return with salt, with knives, with bright cloth that glows strange and vivid against the dull earth of their cottages. The journey is long, the roads rough, but the market is a glimpse of another world. Jugglers performing tricks, musicians plucking at strings, strangers speaking in accents that sound foreign to their ears. For a day, they feel connected to something larger than their own narrow fields, and then they return, the memory of that. Brightness carried like a secret flame against the darker stretches of their ordinary days. In times of trouble, the village tightens its circle. A poor harvest means hunger, but it also means sharing. Families gather in one another's cottages, bowls of thin pottage passed from hand to hand, each taking less so all may have something. In sickness, neighbors watch over children, carry water, tend fires. Death is mourned communally, the church bell tolling slowly as the body is carried. Lanes lined with bowed heads. Grief is not a private thing here. It is carried by all, lightened by all, endured by all. And through it all the land remains. The fields stretch beyond the cottages, the forest looms beyond the fields, the sky arches wide above them all. The peasants live within this vastness, their lives small but essential. Each furrow cut, each seed sown, each loaf baked is another link in a chain that stretches backward into memory and forward into future. Themselves as history, for history is a word that belongs to others, to kings, to wars, to monuments. Yet without them, history would have no foundation. Their silence is its soil, their toil its mortar, their endurance its unbroken thread. Each day lived in obscurity is a day that holds the weight of centuries. Each nameless face, each unrecorded life, is a whisper carried through time, an echo that lingers still, if only we are quiet enough to listen. The passing of years is written. Books, but in the slow weathering of the village itself. Stones in the paths sink deeper into the soil, worn smooth by countless feet. The wooden doors sag on their hinges, patched and repatched, yet still they open each morning to the same rituals. The well-rope phrase, replaced again and again, always lowering the same bucket into the same dark water. These changes are almost invisible to those who live them. To the villagers, life feels unchanging, as though they walk a circle. In truth, time carves its mark quietly, shaping everything around them. Children born in one winter grow into youths by another. Their hands, once soft, harden into calluses. Their eyes, once wide with curiosity, narrow with the focus of labor. They take up the plows, the spindles, the axes, slipping into the roles of their parents as naturally as water fills a harlow. There is no moment of choice, no declaration. The transition is simply lived one day at a time and responsibility has taken its place. The rhythm of meals marks the center of every day. Bread is the constant, coarse, dark, heavy in the stomach. It is eaten at dawn, at midday, at dusk, each loaf the product of hours of grinding, kneading, baking. Alongside it comes pottage, a mixture of grains, beans, herbs, sometimes flavored with meat or fish if fortune allows. These meals are not indulgent, but they are sustaining, filling enough to carry bodies through long hours in the rare days when festivals come or hunts prove successful. Tables glow with greater abundance. Roasted meat, honeyed cakes, fresh cheese. These moments linger in memory, carried like treasures through the leaner days. The seasons bring not only labor, but also the faint shimmer of wonder. Spring mornings fill the air with birdsong, the scent of blossoms drifting through open shutters. Summer evenings stretch long and golden, the air heavy with the warmth of the day, crickets singing in the fields. Autumn paints the forest in fire, leaves crunching beneath feet, the smell of harvest thick in the air. Winter, though cruel, carries its own stillness, the world hushed beneath snow, the stars sharp and clear above the dark cottages. In these moments, life feels briefly touched by something larger, something eternal, though the villagers do not name it. Stories, too, weave their way through the fabric of life. They are told not as entertainment, but as guidance, warnings, memories. Carried forward. Around the hearth, elders speak of saints and sinners, of miracles and curses. They tell of fields ruined by storms, of wolves that stalked too close, of nights when strange lights flickered in the forest. These stories blur the line between truth and superstition, yet they are believed, for belief is less about evidence than about meaning. Children listen wide-eyed, their imaginations painting vivid pictures of what they cannot see. In time, they will tell the same story. Their own children, their voices carrying echoes across generations. The church remains a constant presence, its bell marking the passage of hours and holy days. The villagers kneel on its cold floor, their prayers whispered in a language they do not understand, but whose rhythms soothe nonetheless. The rituals comfort them, binding their toil to something greater than themselves. Baptisms, marriages, funerals, all pass beneath the shadow of its walls. Life begins there, is sanctified there, ends there. The church is the anchor of the village, as enduring as the fields, as unyielding as the seasons. Yet beyond the village, the world stirs. News drifts in with travelers and traders, of wars fought, of kings crowned, of lands discovered far beyond the horizon. These tales feel distant, like dreams glimpsed in sleep. They do not change the rhythm of ploughing, of sowing, of harvest. And yet they remind the peasants that their small lives are part of something larger, a world too. For them to know, but to which they nonetheless belong. And so, day by day, the rhythm continues. The plough cuts furrows, the seeds fall, the sun rises and sets. Children are born, grow, marry, and die, their footsteps blending into the soil, their names fading into silence. Yet the life they live, though humble, is not without weight. It is the quiet weight of endurance, of existence carried steadily through hardship and hope alike. In their silence, in their obscurity, they are history. The history written in chronicles or carved into stone, but the deeper history, the heartbeat beneath the noise, the steady pulse that carries humanity forward. Their lives are echoes, faint but unbroken, murmuring through the centuries, waiting for us to listen in the stillness of night. Welcome back to Echoes of History. Tonight we continue drifting deeper into the quiet lives of those who lived centuries ago, into the rhythms that shaped their days and nights, the slow passage of time. Stretched across generations, their world was not one of battles and crowns, though such things echoed faintly at the edges of their existence. Their world was soil and fire, birth and death, hunger and brief abundance. It was the endless cycle of labor and rest, the turning of seasons that gave shape to their entire reality. Morning begins with the same quiet urgency it always has. The first light presses against the shutters, and the air is cool with the dampness of dawn. Smoke curls upward from chimneys as fires are stoked into life. The smell of ash and baking bread drifts through the lanes, mingling with the low murmur of voices, the clatter of buckets carried to the well. A boy stumbles sleepily with a yawn, filling his pail with cold water as his father checks the harness on the oxen. A mother kneels by the hearth, breaking stale bread into bowls, pouring thin ale or milk to soften it for her children. The morning meal is small, but it is enough to sustain the body through the long hours ahead. The fields are waiting. They always are. The villagers step into the furrows as their parents and grandparents did before them, as their children will after. The soil bears the memory of countless hands, countless seasons of sowing and reaping. Each stone pulled, each weed plucked, each seed pressed into earth is another link in a chain that stretches back beyond memory. The peasants know no other life, yet they do not see it as lacking. To them, this is simply the world. A world bounded by the church at its heart, the fields at its edge, and the forest pressing in beyond. The work is repetitive, yet within it lies a kind of rhythm. The swing of the sickle, the creak of the plough, the hiss of breath as bodies bend and rise, bend and rise. Sweat gathers on brows, runs down backs, dampens rough cloth. The sun climbs, the shadows shorten, the muscles ache. A child runs barefoot along the edge of the furrow, chasing crows from the seed with a stick, his laughter ringing against the low murmur of labor. His sister carries a jug of water, her small arms trembling with its weight. She spills some, is scolded gently, then laughed with, for in truth the work she does is already heavy for her size. By midday the labor pauses. Workers gather in small groups, sitting on the ground or beneath the sparse shade of hedges. Bread is unwrapped, broken, passed hand to hand. An onion is cut and shared, its sharp scent filling the air. A bit of cheese is produced. Rare treat, its taste savored. They speak in low voices, words slow and few, for conversation is a luxury when energy must be saved. Yet in their silence lies comfort, the shared companionship of neighbors who live the same days, carry the same burdens. The afternoon presses harder. The sun bears down, flies swarm, the earth grows dry beneath the relentless heat. Yet still they work. To pause too long is to risk hunger months from now. Each furrow finished, each sheaf gathered, is a promise for the future, a defense against the cruelty of winter. They labor not only for themselves, but for their children, for their elders, for the village as a whole. For here, survival is never solitary. It is communal, bound together in sweat and endurance. Evening brings a gentler air. The oxen are led back, their hides slick with sweat, their breaths heavy. The tools are stacked against the walls of cottages, worn but ready for tomorrow. The villagers walk slowly along the path. Their bodies sore, their eyes heavy, yet there is comfort in return. Fires are lit, casting warm light through the dim interiors. Meals are prepared, a pot of pottage, thickened with beans or peas, flavored with herbs gathered from the forest. Bread is torn and dipped, spoons scrape against wooden bowls. Conversation is quiet, sometimes nothing more than a few words between bites. Yet laughter still rises, the sound of children's games, the low murmur of stories told by firelight. Constant companion, they weave through the nights, carrying both memory and imagination. Elders recall winters so harsh that wolves prowled the lanes, summers so dry that fields cracked open. They speak of saints who walked among men, of miracles worked in distant towns, of curses that fell upon those who broke faith. The children listen, their eyes wide, their imaginations alight with visions of things unseen. These stories are not entertainment alone. They are warnings, guidance, belief that bind generations together. The church bell marks time as firmly as the sun. On holy days, the people gather within its stone walls, kneeling on cold floors, the air thick with incense and candle smoke. The priest speaks in Latin, his words more sound than meaning to their ears, but the rituals soothe them nonetheless. In baptism, in marriage, in burial, they find connection to something larger than themselves. Life is hard, but the church tells them it is not meaningless. Suffering is part of a greater story, their endurance a path to salvation. They do not question deeply, they accept, for acceptance is its own kind of strength. And so the seasons turn. Spring brings mud and the planting of seeds. Summer brings long days of growth, buzzing fields, sweat-soaked backs. Autumn brings harvest, the flurry of scythes and sickles, the barns filling with grain. Winter brings silence, hunger, the closeness of the hearth, the telling of stories. Each season carries both trial and hope, both hardship and brief relief. Together they weave the fabric of life, a fabric worn but enduring, strong in its simplicity. Generations pass this way. A boy becomes a man becomes a father becomes a memory whispered by firelight. A girl becomes a mother becomes an elder becomes a figure in stories told to wide-eyed children. Time does not rush here. It settles slowly, folding one life into another until the village itself. Though it has always been and will always be, the world beyond may shift, kings may rise and fall, battles may rage across distant fields, discoveries may alter the shape of empires. But here, in the small cottages by the well, beneath the tolling of the church bell, life remains steady. The plough still cuts the soil. The bread still bakes on the hearth. The children still laugh in the lanes. History passes by, but the villagers endure, their lives quiet yet unbroken, their footsteps into the soil yet echoing softly across the centuries. The year unfolds again, as it always does, but within its turning there are moments that break the sameness, small shifts that leave lasting marks upon memory. The arrival of a stranger is one such moment. Travelers are rare, and when one appears upon the lane, leading a weary horse or bearing a pack upon his shoulders, the entire village takes notice. Children follow at a distance, whispering and laughing, their curiosity bound. Step from their cottages, cautious, measuring the figure with narrowed eyes. Women pause in their work, their hands still upon spinning wheel or cooking pot, listening for scraps of news. The traveler may be a merchant, his cart rattling with goods from towns unseen by the villagers. He brings cloth dyed in vivid hues, parts of iron stronger than any made locally, combs and mirrors carved with patterns unfamiliar. His wares are tempting though costly, and few can afford more than a trinket. Even the sight of them lingers, a reminder that the world beyond the fields is wide and strange. He tells of markets in far cities, of roads that stretch farther than the eye can follow, of rivers broad as seas. His words fall into eager ears, weaving dreams that flicker in the firelight long after he departs. Sometimes the stranger is a pilgrim, dusty and worn, staff in hand, eyes lifted toward a distant shrine. His voice carries stories of relics that heal, of holy men of visions seen upon lonely roads. The villagers listen, heads bowed, their hearts caught between wonder and doubt. They press food into his hands, offer him shelter by the fire, for to aid a pilgrim is to gain a blessing. And when he leaves, they feel a thread of connection to something larger, something divine, though their own feet will never walk so far. Other times, the visitor is less welcome, a soldier bearing the crest of a distant lord. His voice is harsh, his demands unyielding. Grain is taken, livestock seized, labor conscripted for walls and roads that do not serve the village. The peasants bow their heads, their protests swallowed by fear. When the soldiers leave, the village feels smaller, emptier, its stores depleted. Yet even then they return to their fields, their work, their rhythm. The soil must still be tilled, the bread still baked. Life cannot pause for anger or grief. Festivals brighten these cycles, moments of joy carved from hardship. On eve, fires are lit at the edge of the fields. The flames leap high into the night, sparks drifting like stars against the darkness. Villagers gather, their voices raised in song, their hands joined in dances that circle the blaze. Children dart in and out of the firelight, their laughter sharp and clear. Young men test their courage, leaping through the flames, their silhouettes vanishing in the smoke before reappearing to cheers. The air is thick with the scent of herbs, of roasting meat, of ale passed from hand to hand. For a single night, burdens are forgotten, replaced by joy that glows as brightly as the fire itself. Autumn brings its own celebration, the harvest feast. When the barns are full, when the fields are bare, the villagers gather to give thanks. Tables are laid with bread, with cheese, with meat saved for the occasion. Jugs of ale are opened, their contents flowing freely. The priest blesses the food, voices murmur prayers, and then laughter takes over. Dances. The night, songs echo against the walls of cottages. The feast is more than a celebration. It is a reassurance, a promise that the work of the year has been worth it, that the winter to come can be faced with courage. Yet not all nights are filled with fire and song. Some nights stretch long and uneasy when illness creeps quietly through the village. A cough begins in one cottage, then another. Fever takes hold, leaving bodies shivering beneath rough blankets. Herbs are steeped, prayers whispered, charms hung above doorways. Some recover, their strength returning slowly. Others fade, their breaths shallow, their eyes dim. The church bell tolls low and heavy, marking another loss. The villagers gather in silence, their faces lined with grief, carrying the body to the small graveyard where wooden crosses lean in the wind. The earth closes over the lost, and life moves on as it must, but the absence lingers like a shadow. Through it all, the seasons remain the truest rulers of the village. Spring softens the soil, summer ripens the grain, autumn fills the barns, winter strips them bare again. This rhythm is endless, yet within it each life unfolds childhood, youth, parenthood, age, death. A boy grows into a man who tills the same soil as his father, who tells the same stories to his children, who bows his head in the same church, who is buried beneath the same earth. Each generation replaces the last, yet the village endures, steady and unchanging. The peasants do not see themselves as part of history. They do not know that centuries will pass, that their world will vanish, that their lives will become whispers studied in books. They do not imagine an audience in the far future, listening in the quiet hours of night. They live only the day before them, the soil beneath their feet, the fire that warms their hands, the faces of those they love. And yet in their silence, they are history itself, the hidden foundation, the unbroken chain, the heartbeat that carried humanity forward when no one was watching. The life of the village is measured not in days but in cycles, each one repeating with small variations, each one carrying both hardship and hope. Yet within this sameness, time leaves subtle imprints like grooves cut into wood by the steady passing of a blade. A child who once played barefoot in the dust now kneels in the furrows beside his father. A young girl who once carried sticks now cradles her own chaff. Gently by the fire, an elder whose voice once filled the evenings with stories now sits silent, listening as younger voices take his place. The village is the same, yet always changing as generations fold into one another. Marriage weaves these generations together. The union of two families is marked by little more than the blessing of the priest, a shared meal, a dance in the lane. Yet it is a moment of brightness, when laughter carries farther than usual, when neighbors share what they. A jug of ale, a wheel of cheese, a song remembered from their own youth. The bride wears her best tunic, often the same her mother once wore, the fabric patched but cared for. The groom stands awkwardly, his hands rough with soil, his eyes shy. They are not joined for romance, though affection may come. They are joined for survival, for the building of a life together in a world that asks much and gives little. Children soon follow, their cries mingling with the crackle of the fire, their small bodies swaddled in cloth spun and woven within the cottage walls. They are carried on their mothers' backs as work continues, lulled to sleep by the rhythm of motion. Their presence is both joy and burden, for each mouth to feed stretches the stores thinner. Yet no greater joy is known than watching a child take his first steps across the dirt floor, his laughter rising above the weariness of the day. The years leave their marks. Hands grow rougher, backs bend, faces crease with carved by sun and worry, yet the rhythm of work continues. In spring, the earth is broken open, seeds pressed into furrows. In summer, weeds are pulled, fields guarded against pests and storms. In autumn, the sickle flashes, grain gathered and stored. In winter, the earth rests, and the people huddle by their fires, their voices weaving stories and songs against the long dark. Each cycle repeats, yet each carries the weight of countless small struggles, a poor harvest, a sickness, a tears through the fields. Each year survived is a quiet triumph. The wider world touches them only in glances. A tax collector arrives, demanding grain for the Lord. A messenger passes, speaking of wars fought far away. A band of soldiers tramps through, their presence heavy, their demands sharp. These moments remind the villagers that they live under powers larger than themselves, though such powers remain distant, almost abstract. The villagers bow their heads, give what they must then. Return to their furrows and their fires, for their lives are not lived in courts or battlefields. Their lives are lived in the soil, in the cottages, in the spaces between dawn and dusk. The elders remain as guides, their knowledge passed not in books but in words, in habits, in the quiet teaching of hands. They show how to mend a roof with thatch, how to store grain against damp, how to read the sky for signs of weather. Their bodies may weaken, but their presence is steady, their memories thread tying past to present. When they pass, their absence is felt not only in the hearth they leave empty, but in the silence where their voices once carried. Yet even in death they remain, their names whispered, their stories retold, their lessons carried forward. There are moments of fear that mark memory as sharply as joy. A child lost in the forest, his name called through the night until he is found, shivering but alive. A fire that leaps from one roof to another, sending the village into chaos as buckets of water are passed hand to hand. A sickness that takes more than it spares, leaving cottages quiet, shutters closed, the bell tolling again and again. These moments shape the village, reminding all how fragile life is, how easily it can be undone. And yet always the work continues. The furrows must be cut, the bread baked, the fires kept alive. And then there are moments of wonder. The first flower pushing through frost in spring, the sight of a hawk circling above. Fields, the taste of honey gathered from bees in summer, the sound of laughter around a fire on a winter's night, voices rising together in song. These small wonders are not recorded, not remembered by history, but they are felt deeply by those who live them. They are the moments that soften the hardness of existence, the sparks of light within the endless rhythm of toil. In the end, the village is not defined by great events, but by these countless small moments, layered one upon, building lives that are humble yet profound. They do not seek to be remembered. They seek only to endure, to raise their children, to survive another winter, to greet another spring. Yet in their endurance lies the quiet foundation of all that came after. Their names fade, their faces vanish, but their lives remain, echoing softly through time, carrying the weight of history in silence. The forest at the edge of the fields holds its own quiet presence in the lives of the villagers. It is both a source of life and a place of unease. By day, they venture into it carefully, gathering firewood, cutting timber, searching for berries and herbs. Children follow their mothers, small hands clutching baskets, their eyes darting nervously at every crack of a twig. The forest is generous, but it is also unpredictable. Wolves move silently among the trees, and stories of spirits are told often enough to make even the bravest glance over their shoulder as they walk beneath the canopy. The forest offers wild garlic, mushrooms, and herbs used for cooking and medicine. In summer, berries ripen, staining hands and mouths with their sweetness. In autumn, nuts fall in abundance, gathered and stored for the leaner months. Even in winter, the forest gives what it can: dead branches for firewood, pine needles for bedding, bark that can be ground and mixed with flour when hunger presses hardest. Yet every trip into the woods is marked with caution. The shadows stretch long, and silence within is heavy. The villagers know the forest as both friend and danger, a place that sustains them yet keeps them wary. The animals of the village form another part of its rhythm. Chickens scatter in the lanes, their feathers ruffled as children chase them laughing. Goats bleat from pens, their milk carried in small pails each morning. Pigs root noisily in the mud, their grunts echoing through the cottages. Dogs bark at passing strangers, their tails wagging when children pull at their ears. The oxen, patient and strong, carry the heaviest burden, pressing their shoulders against the wooden yokes, pulling plows through stubborn soil. Each animal is more than a companion, it is survival. The loss of a cow, a pig, even a few chickens can mean hunger in the months ahead. The animals are tended carefully, their lives intertwined with the lives of those who care for them. The weather, too, dictates much of life. A sudden storm can flatten fields, tearing thatch from roofs, sending water rushing through lanes. A dry summer cracks the earth, withers the crops, leaves the well low. A harsh winter freezes the ground, starves the animals, makes firewood scarce. The villagers learn to read the sky, to listen to the wind, to sense the signs of change. They know the meaning of a red dawn, the feel of damp air before rain, the silence before a storm. Their survival depends upon it, for they are bound to the land, vulnerable to its every shift. Within the cottages, the work never ceases. Women spin wool, their fingers twisting fibers into thread, their spindles turning endlessly. They weave cloth on looms, their feet pressing pedals, their hands guiding the shuttle back and forth. Children sit nearby, watching, learning, their small hands practicing the motions. Clothes are patched and repatched, fabric turned inside out, seams stitched again. Nothing is wasted, nothing discarded until it is beyond use. The rhythm of spinning and weaving fills the evenings. The quiet hum of industry beneath the crackle of the fire. The blacksmith's hammer rings out during the day, the steady clang of metal upon metal echoing across the village. He shapes iron into nails, into hinges, into plowshares and knives. Sparks fly, smoke curls upward, the heat of the forge a constant presence. His work is essential, and though his hands are scarred, his back bent, his place in the village is secure. The carpenter, too, labors steadily, shaping wood into carts, handles into the beams that hold up the cottages. Their skills carry weight, for without them the tools would break, the shelters collapse, the work falter. The rhythms of faith weave through every day. The church bell tolls in the morning, at midday, at evening, calling villagers to prayer. On Sundays the people gather, their clothes brushed clean, their hair smoothed, their voices rising together in chant. The priest speaks of heaven and hell, of sin and redemption, his words echoing through the stone walls. The villagers listen, some with deep devotion, others with weary resignation, but all with the knowledge that the church is as central to their lives as the fields. Baptisms welcome new life, marriages bind families, funerals mark the end of journeys. Each stage of life passes through its doors, sanctified, blessed, folded into the greater story of salvation. In rare moments of leisure, music fills the air. A fiddle is played, its notes sharp and quick. Voices, song rough but full, carrying melodies older than memory. Children clap their hands, neighbors stamp their feet, laughter bubbles in the night. These moments are fleeting, but they are treasured, carried like light through the darker days. They remind the villagers that life, though hard, holds joy as well as toil. And always, beneath it all, the cycle continues. The soil is broken and sown, The grain ripens and is cut, the barns fill and empty, the fires burn and fade. The peasants endure, their lives bound tightly to the land, their days unmarked by grandeur yet heavy with meaning. They live in silence, yet their silence echoes still, carried forward through time, whispering the story of endurance, of survival, of humanity at its most constant and its most enduring. The market days in the nearby town are among the rare times when the villagers step beyond the narrow bounds of their cottages and fields. The journey itself begins before dawn, baskets and sacks slung over. Shoulders, carts pulled by weary oxen. The road is rough, cutting through forests and across streams, but the promise of the market draws them onward. Children tug at their mothers' skirts, wide-eyed at the thought of what awaits. Men walk in silence, thinking of the trades they might make, the grain they might sell, the goods they might return with. By mid-morning, the town comes into view. Its walls rise above the fields, its towers casting long shadows, its gates busy with the comings and goings of merchants and travelers. For the villagers, the sight is both wondrous and intimidating. Their world is small, but here, beyond the walls, the world feels vast, filled with voices, colors, smells they do not know. The market square teems with life, stalls overflowing with goods, the cries of sellers, the clang of blacksmiths, the laughter of jugglers. It is overwhelming, a feast for the senses. The villagers move cautiously, clutching their baskets tightly, their eyes darting from stall to stall. They see fabrics dyed in shades of red and blue that seem impassable, spices that sting their noses with sharp, unfamiliar scents, trinkets carved from bone and metal, knives that gleam with sharp edges finer than any they have at home. They trade what they can, wool for salt, grain for iron, honey for cloth. Each trade is a careful calculation, for every handful of grain given away must be replaced through sweat and soil. Yet even the smallest purchase feel. Comb a new part, a length of ribbon for a daughter, these things become heirlooms, passed down through generations. The market is more than trade. It is also news. Voices carry tales of wars fought in distant lands, of kings crowned and overthrown, of plagues that have swept through cities. The villagers listen, their faces solemn, though these events feel as far away as the stars. And yet sometimes the world presses closer. Taxes may rise, soldiers may pass through, roads may be awed. Built, the villagers nod, exchange glances, and return to their trades, for there is little they can do but endure. The journey home is quieter. The baskets are heavier now, filled with goods hard-won through bargaining. The children clutch their small treasures, a whistle carved from wood, a scrap of bright cloth, their eyes shining with delight. The oxen plod steadily, the sun lowering behind them. When the cottages come back into sight, the villagers breathe easier. The market is a glimpse of the vastness of the world, but home is where life is lived, where fires are lit, where bread is baked. As the years pass, such journeys become woven into the fabric of memory. An elder recalls the first time he saw a town wall, the sound of bells tolling from towers taller than trees. A mother tells her children of the time she saw a juggler with fire, the sparks dancing like stars against the night. These memories are repeated, embroidered, passed down until they become stories that outlive those who first saw them. But most days are lived within the village itself, where time feels slower, marked by simpler rhythms. In the heat of summer, women wash clothes in the stream, their hands red from the water, their voices rising in song as they work. Children splash nearby, their laughter mingling with the sound of fabric striking stone. In the cool of autumn, men mend fences, sharpen tools, prepare the barns for winter. The air smells of smoke, of apples drying, of grain stored away. Winter brings silence once more, the world reduced to the glow of the hearth, the sound of wind at the door, the taste of thin broth ladled carefully into bowls. Amid this endless cycle, lives are born and lives are lost. A birth is marked with celebration, neighbors crowding into the small cottage, offering gifts of bread, cheese, a blessing whispered over the infant's head. A death is marked with silence, the church bell tolling, the village gathering to walk slowly to the graveyard. Their breaths visible in the cold air. Both moments bind the village together, reminding all of the fragile balance that governs their existence. And through it all, the village endures. The cottages sag, but they are repaired. The fields flood, but they are drained. Illness comes, but it passes. Hunger gnaws, but it is endured. Life does not offer ease, but it offers continuity, and within that continuity lies meaning. The peasants do not know that their lives will one day be studied, their struggles remembered in books. They do not see themselves as part of history. Yet in every furrow they cut, in every loaf they bake, in every child they raise, they are history itself, silent, steady, enduring. The village moves through the decades as though time itself is a slow river, carrying everything forward but leaving the banks unchanged. Generations rise and fall, yet the rhythms remain. The tolling of the bell, the bending of backs in the fields, the crackle of fires in the hearth. And though the world beyond shifts with kings and wars, for the peasants, the measure of existence is always found in the turning of the soil, the changing of the seasons, and the persistence of life through hardship. At dawn, the village stirs. Smoke climbs lazily from chimneys as fires are coaxed into flame. The sound of roosters breaks the quiet, answered by the lowing of cattle, the bleating of goats. Children shuffle barefoot across dirt floors, rubbing sleep from their eyes as mothers press bread into their hands, softening it with ale or milk. Fathers fasten ropes, shoulder tools, lead oxen from barns, their heavy breaths clouding in the morning air. It is a scene repeated for centuries, so constant that it feels less like choice and more like the law of the world itself. The lanes fill with movement as the villagers spread into the fields. Their footsteps mark the earth, paths carved by countless generations. The fields stretch outward, brown and damp in spring, humming in summer, golden in autumn, white with frost in winter. Each season brings its own demands, each demand its own weight. In spring they break the soil, bent low with spades, hands raw, muscles aching. They sow seeds with careful hope, pressing them into earth that may or may not be kind. In summer they weed and guard, sweat running down their faces, the sun unrelenting, storms threatening to undo their labor in a single night. In autumn they reap, sickles flashing, grain, great bundles, barns filling with the fruits of their endurance. In winter they endure the silence, the cold, the thin meals, waiting for the earth to wake again. The work is endless, but within it, the village breathes. Children grow into their tasks, carrying water, chasing birds, learning to guide plows, to spin wool, to tend fires. They mimic their parents at first, turning labor into play, until the play itself becomes real, until laughter fades into the quiet concentration of hands. Know their work. By the time they are grown, they slip naturally into the rhythm, their childhoods already fading behind them like smoke from the hearth. Within the cottages, life unfolds in smaller circles. Women sit at looms, weaving cloth in steady rhythms, the thrum of the shuttle blending with the crackle of fire. They spin wool into thread, mend clothes, prepare food, tend children. Nothing is wasted, scraps of fabric become patches, bones become broth, ashes become lye for soap. Repair tools, mend fences, shape wood into handles and beams. The blacksmith's forge glows, sparks flying as he hammers iron into plowshares and knives, the sound ringing through the village like a heartbeat. Each task is humble, yet each one sustains the whole, each one binding the fabric of life tighter together. The church remains the anchor, its bell tolling through the air, its stone walls cool and eternal. The villagers gather within its shadow on Sundays and holy days, kneeling on floors, their voices raised in chant. The priest speaks of heaven and hell, of sin and salvation. They do not understand every word, for the Latin rolls beyond their reach, but the rhythm of it comforts them. They bow their heads, cross themselves, murmur prayers. For them, faith is not a question of doctrine, but of survival. It gives meaning to hunger, to illness, to death. It ties their lives to something greater, assuring them that their toil is not in vain, that their suffering is not. Without purpose, the cycle of life passes through the church as well. Infants are carried to its font, water poured over their heads, names spoken into existence. Couples stand before its altar, hands joined, vows whispered beneath the gaze of saints carved into stone. The dead are carried past its doors, bells tolling, voices solemn, their bodies laid into earth that has received countless others before. Each stage of existence is folded into ritual, sanctified, made part of eternity. Yet beyond the rituals, life is fragile. Illness comes often, striking without warning, carrying away children, elders, sometimes those in the strength of their years. Herbs are gathered from the forest, teas brewed, charms hung above beds. Some recover, rising slowly from fever. Others do not, their absence felt in the silence of cottages, in the empty places at the fire. Death is mourned, but it is also accepted, as familiar as the seasons, as steady as the turning of the fields. The forest at the village's edge is both sustenance and shadow. In its depths, herbs are gathered, berries picked, timber cut. Yet stories cling to it as thickly as mist, of spirits that wander beneath its boughs, of lights that flicker in the night, of wolves that move silently between trees. Children are warned not to stray too far, though their curiosity often carries them to its edge, where they stare into the darkness with both fear and fascination. For the villagers, the forest is as eternal as the fields, generous, dangerous, necessary. There are days of joy, scattered but shining. A midsummer fire burns high, villagers dancing in circles, their laughter rising into the night. A wedding fills the lanes with music, neighbors sharing food and drink, voices raised in song. A successful harvest brings feasting, bread and ale passed freely, stories told until the stars fade from the sky. These moments do not erase the hardship, but they soften it, reminding the villagers. Life holds not only struggle but also light. And then there are days of fear. Soldiers march through, banners snapping, their demands leaving cottages emptied of grain and barns stripped bare. Plagues sweep silently, leaving shutters closed, lanes silent, church bells tolling again and again. Storms rise in the night, tearing roofs from homes, flooding the fields, leaving ruin where there was labor. In these moments, the villagers cling to one another, their strength not in weapons or in the bonds of community. Neighbors share what little they have, rebuild together, mourn together. It is this unity as much as their toil that allows them to endure. Generations pass in this rhythm. A boy becomes a father, then a grandfather, then a memory. A girl becomes a mother, then a grandmother, then a name whispered in stories. The cottages remain, patched and mended, their walls holding the echoes of countless lives. The fields remain, furrowed and sown, harvested and emptied, their soil carrying the imprint of centuries. The church remains, its bell tolling through the air, marking the hours, the days, the seasons, the years. To the villagers, their lives are ordinary, small, unnoticed. They do not imagine that centuries later their existence will be studied, their struggles remembered, their silence honored. They do not see themselves as history. Yet history itself is built upon their backs, upon their hands, upon their quiet endurance. The great battles, the crowned kings, the rising empires, all of these rest upon the unbroken labor of those who lived and died in silence. And so the village endures. The seasons turn, the soil is broken and sown, the fires are lit and fade, the voices rise and fall. Life continues, humble, unyielding, eternal in its repetition. And in that repetition lies the essence of humanity, not in the noise of power, but in the quiet rhythm of survival, in the countless small lives that together form the vast, the past. The village, for all its stillness, is never entirely silent. Each day is filled with layers of sound, woven together like threads. The creak of cart wheels on uneven lanes, the crack of an axe splitting wood, the dull thud of a hoe striking soil. Voices rise and fall, low murmurs of men in the fields, the sharp laughter of children chasing one another across the green, the soft hum of women singing as they spin or weave. Even the animals add their notes, the bleating of goat, crowing of roosters, the steady lowing of cattle waiting to be led to pasture. It is not noise, but rhythm, the constant background of life unfolding. In the evenings, when the work is done, the sound changes. Fires crackle in hearths, their warmth the heart of every cottage. The smell of smoke and broth fills the air as families gather close, their faces painted in shifting light. A father tells a story in a voice low and steady, his words flowing like the river outside the village. A mother hums as she spins wool, her spindle turning slowly, her eyes soft as she watches her children drift into sleep. Outside, crickets sing, and the wind presses gently against the walls. The world shrinks to the glow of firelight, the murmurs of voices, the quiet breath of those resting together. The seasons mark themselves not only in the fields but in every aspect of daily life. In spring, the cottages are aired, windows thrown open to let out the stale air of winter. Herbs are gathered, swept, tools sharpened. Children run barefoot through mud, their shouts ringing as brightly as the birds above. In summer, the village hums with life. Doors are left open, laughter drifts into lanes, meals are eaten outside in the long golden light. By autumn, the air carries the sharp scent of apples, of smoke rising from the first fires, of grain threshed and stored. Winter brings the hush again, shutters closed, smoke heavy in the air, voices quieter, the world outside blanketed in white. The villagers measure time not in years, but in these cycles, in the repetition of tasks, in the slow growth of children, in the gradual fading of elders. A girl is born in the cold of winter, baptized with water drawn from beneath ice. She grows into a child who scatters seed in spring, into a young woman who carries baskets of grain in autumn, into a mother who rocks her child by the fire in winter. In time, she becomes an elder herself, her voice guiding others, her hands fold, until she too is carried by neighbors to the churchyard, her body laid into the earth. Her life is one among many, yet together these lives create a continuity that stretches farther than memory. The churchyard stands at the edge of the village, its crosses leaning, its ground soft with centuries of burials. Children play among the stones, weaving games through the markers of the dead, their laughter rising above the silence. For the villagers, the churchyard is not a place of fear, but of familiarity. Each grave holds a father, a mother, a child, a neighbor. Each mound of earth is a reminder that life is fleeting, yet also unbroken. The dead are not forgotten. Their names are spoken in stories, their faces remembered in the lines of their children, their work carried on in the fields they once tilled. From time to time, the quiet is broken by events larger than the village itself. A messenger rides through, his horse lathered, carrying word of battles fought far away. A collector arrives, his demands heavy, his presence unwelcome. A sickness sweeps through, shutters closed, bells tolling. These moments remind the villagers of the vast world beyond, a world of kings and wars and powers they cannot touch. Yet once the messenger leaves, once the tax is paid, once the sickness passes, the rhythm resumes. The fields still need tending, the bread still needs baking, the fires still need feeding. Life bends, but it does not break. Festivals punctuate the year. Bursts of color on a muted canvas. At midsummer, great fires are lit, sparks swirling into the night sky, villagers dancing in circles, their laughter mingling with the crackle of flames. At harvest, tables are laid with bread and ale, songs rising as neighbors clasp hands and spin across the green. Even in winter, when hunger presses close, the feast of Christmas brings warmth. The church glows with candlelight, hymns echoing in the cold air, and afterward families share what they have. Goose roasted, a pie sweetened with honey, a loaf of bread made richer than usual. These moments are not simply celebrations. They are acts of defiance, reminders that joy can exist even in hardship, that community can shine even in darkness. The children grow, the elders fade, the seasons turn, the cottages lean but endure. The village persists generation after generation, its people unremarked upon by chronicles, unnoticed by the powerful, yet essential to the. Lives are small, but within their smallness lies a vastness, the quiet persistence of humanity, the unbroken chain of survival. In the end, their legacy is not written in stone or ink, but in the soil they tilled, the bread they baked, the fires they tended, the children they raised. Their footsteps fade into the earth, their voices vanish into silence, yet still they remain, echoing softly, reminding us that history is not only made in palaces and on battlefields, it is also made here. Quiet lanes of a village, in the daily endurance of those who lived, loved, struggled, and endured. There are mornings when the mist clings to the ground, when the village seems half-dreaming, its cottages blurred, its fields softened into shapes that dissolve with distance. On such mornings, the peasants move quietly, their footsteps muffled in the damp air, their breath mingling with the fog. The oxen snort and stamp, their broad backs slick with dew, the sound of wooden wheels creaking down. The lane carries farther than voices. It feels as if the world itself has paused, holding its breath before the day truly begins. Yet the work does not wait. The soil must be turned, even if the mist lingers. Seeds must be sown, even if the air is heavy with silence. The peasants know that the earth cares nothing for weather or mood. It only yields to steady labor. They bend their backs once more, hands tightening on tools worn smooth by years, their movements slow but practiced. Labor fills the mist, the scrape of hoe and the low commands to animals breaking the quiet. As the sun rises higher, the fog thins, and the village emerges from its shroud. Children run barefoot along the lanes, their laughter clear now, their games weaving through the legs of livestock, their shouts echoing against cottage walls. A mother calls them back, pressing bread into their hands before sending them out again to gather kindling or fetch water. Their lives are light, but even in childhood, the rhythm of duty begins to weave itself into their play. They mimic their parents' labor, dragging sticks through dirt as though plowing, shaping mud into loaves as though baking. In their games, the future is already written. By midday, the sun warms the air, and the village is alive with sound. The blacksmith's hammer rings from his forge, sparks leaping as he bends iron into shape. The carpenter planes wood into beams, his hands steady, his eyes narrowed in concentration. We sit with their spindles, wool twisting into thread as their fingers move in endless circles. In the distance, the shepherd calls to his flock, his voice rising and falling across the fields. Each sound belongs to the greater chorus of the village, each task blending into the rhythm that sustains them all. In the evenings, the rhythm shifts. The lanes grow quieter as workers return, shoulders bent, arms weary, tools carried home. Fires glow in every doorway, smoke rising into the twilight. Inside, the families gather around their hearths. Pottage bubbles in iron pots, the smell of beans, onions, and herbs filling the air. Bread is broken and dipped, spoons scrape against bowls, voices murmur low. A child leans sleepily against his mother, his hair lit by firelight. An elder begins a story, his voice slow, deliberate, weaving memory and myth together until the cottage seems filled with the weight of unseen things. The stories told in these hours are as important as the work. They bind the generations, carrying lessons and warnings, shaping the imagination of the young. Tales of saints and spirits, of miracles and curses, of winters harsher than this one, of summers that yielded more than enough. These stories are not only entertainment, they are the archive of the village, its library spoken by firelight, its memory kept alive through repetition. The forest remains both near and distant, always present at the edge of sight. In the daylight, it is a play. Gathering herbs, berries, timber. In the night, it is a place of unease. Strange lights are said to flicker beneath its branches, voices to whisper where no one walks. Wolves move silently there, their howls carried on the wind to the very doors of cottages. Children are warned not to stray beyond the lanes, though the stories both frighten and tempt them. The forest is a reminder that the world beyond the village is vast, untamed, and unknowable. The church anchors their days, its bell, tolling across fields and lanes. On feast days, the villagers gather within its stone walls, the air cool and heavy with incense. Candles burn, their light flickering across painted images of saints and angels. The priest speaks in solemn tones, his words often beyond understanding, yet the people bow their heads in reverence. The rituals are steady, dependable. They remind the villagers that their toil, their hunger, their losses are not meaningless, but part of a greater order. Bapti. Marriages, funerals, all pass beneath its roof, tying each life to eternity. There are nights when music rises, when the heaviness of labor is set aside for a while. A fiddle is played, its notes sharp and bright. Voices join in song, rough but strong, carrying melodies older than memory. Feet stamp against the earth, hands clap, laughter bubbles through the air. Children watch with wide eyes as their parents dance, as neighbors join hands, as the night becomes a brief blaze of joy. The moments linger in memory, carried through the darker days that follow. But hardship never retreats for long. Illness comes with winter, its coughs echoing in cottages, its fevers burning through families. Hunger creeps when harvests fail, bowls filled with thinner and thinner broth, bread stretched with ground acorns or bark. Storms tear roofs from cottages, floods drown fields, fire spreads from thatch to thatch in the night. In these moments, the strength of the village is tested. Yet it is. Here, too, that its unity shines. Neighbors rebuild walls together, share what little food remains, watch one another's children. Their survival is never individual. It is always communal, bound in ties of necessity and compassion. Generations pass this way, each one folding into the next. The faces of children grow into the faces of parents, then into the lined faces of elders. Names fade, memories blur, yet the rhythm continues. The cottages sag, but are mended. Renewed, the church bell tolls again and again. To the villagers, life is simple, ordinary, unnoticed. But in truth, their days are the hidden foundation of history. It is their silent endurance, their unrecorded labor, that carries humanity forward, century after century, unseen but unbroken. The rhythm of the fields dictates nearly everything, yet life within the village also beats to its own patterns. The lanes are narrow, worn into the earth by countless footsteps, bordered, wattle and daub, their thatched roofs patched with straw each season. Smoke stains rise dark above them, carrying the scent of oak and ash, of meals cooking slowly in iron pots. Chickens scatter through the lanes, pecking at the ground, their feathers ruffled by children who chase them laughing. Dogs curl in doorways, ears pricking at every sound. The cottages may be small, the walls thin, but they are alive with the breath of generations. Inside, space is close. One room, sometimes two. A family together. The hearth is the center, its glow the only light through long winter nights. The fire warms, cooks, dries the damp from clothes and hair, keeps sickness at bay. Beds are little more than straw piled thick, covered with blankets of wool, patched and worn. Tools hang along walls, carefully placed, ready for the next day's labor. Every item is valued, nothing wasted. A broken part becomes a scoop, A torn tunic becomes a rag, scraps of wood become toys for children. Are humble, but within them the pulse of life beats steadily. The lives of women shape much of the daily rhythm. They rise before dawn, stoking fires, kneading dough, carrying water. Their hands twist wool into thread, weave cloth on looms, patch garments that have already served for years. They tend gardens behind the cottages, coaxing herbs and vegetables from small plots of soil. They gather children close, soothing cries, teaching them songs and prayers, guiding their small hands. Tasks. Their work is never still, never silent, yet often unnoticed, folded into the fabric of survival as naturally as breath itself. The men's strength is bent toward the heavier tasks, plowing, harvesting, building, repairing. They lead oxen, fell trees, raise beams for roofs. Their bodies ache, their hands are hardened with callus, their shoulders stooped with weight. Yet in the evenings their laughter is deep, their songs loud, their presence steady. Around the fire they tell stories of storms survived, of hunts remembered, of winters endured. Their voices carry authority, but also warmth, binding the family close in the dim light. Children live between these worlds, their lives short with play but long with learning. They chase each other through the lanes, their laughter sharp and bright against the drone of labor. Yet from early years they carry tasks, gathering eggs, carrying water, tending fires. They mimic their parents' movements, first in play, then in earnest, until their own hands are hardened, their own shoulders bent. Childhood is fleeting here, but even within its brevity, joy survives. The joy of chasing fireflies in the evening, of shaping figures from mud, of listening wide-eyed to stories by the fire. The elders sit by the hearths, their voices the memory of the village. They recall storms that swept away harvests, winters when wolves prowled close, summers when grain grew taller than men. Their words are part truth, part embellishment, but are remembered. They teach through stories, stories of saints who healed the sick, of spirits who punished the proud, of neighbors remembered for kindness or folly long after they were gone. Their presence steadies the village, their wisdom guiding younger hands. When they pass, their absence leaves silence heavy in the cottages, their stories carried forward by others. At the center of it all stands the church. Its stone walls rise above the cottages, its bell tolling through the air. It marks every stage of life, from baptism to burial. Within, the air is cool, smelling of incense and wax, its walls painted with images of saints whose lives seem distant, yet whose presence comforts. On Sundays, the villagers kneel together, their voices murmuring prayers, their eyes lifted to flickering candles. The priest speaks of salvation, of sin, of heaven and hell. They listen, some with faith, others with weary habit, but all with the sense that here in these walls, their lives are given meaning. The cycle of labor and faith is sometimes broken by sudden disruption. A fire sweeps through thatch, flames leaping from roof to roof, villagers rushing with buckets of water, voices shouting through smoke. A storm tears through the fields, flattening crops, leaving ruin where there was hope. A sickness spreads, cottages shuttered, the bell tolling too often, its slow sound carrying grief through the air. In these moments, the fragility of life is felt most keenly. Yet always, the rhythm resumes. The fires are rebuilt, the fields resown, the sick buried, the living carrying on. And still there are sparks of joy. Festivals draw neighbors together, fires burning high into the night, songs and dances weaving through the lanes. Weddings bring laughter and music, feasts shared, hands joined, new lives begun. Harvests, when successful, bring relief, tables laden with bread, cheese, ale, roasted meat, children wide-eyed at the abundance. These moments are brief, but shine brightly, their memory carried through the darker seasons. Generations rise and fall, names fade, faces vanish, yet the village endures. Its cottages sag, its fields shift, its people change, but the rhythm continues. Their lives are quiet, unrecorded, unseen by the grand chronicles of kings and wars. But their silence is not empty. It is the heartbeat of history itself, steady and unbroken, carrying humanity forward one day, one season, one life at a time. Winter holds the land in silence, the fields lying barren beneath frost, the trees stripped of leaf and color. Within the cottages, life contracts into the glow of the hearth. Families gather close, the room filled with the smell of smoke and broth, the sound of quiet voices and the crackle of wood. Outside, the lanes are empty, the world muffled by snow. Each day is endured with patience, the fire tended, the bread measured carefully, each ember and crumb guarded as though it were gold. Hunger lingers at the edges, but so too does resilience. For as long as the fire burns, as long as hands continue their work, life persists. With the first signs of thaw, the village stirs again. The snow softens into streams, running through the lanes, soaking boots, filling the air with the smell of wet earth. Doors open, shutters are thrown wide, and the sound of water dripping from eaves is everywhere. Men lead oxen to the fields, their hooves sinking deep into mud, their shoulders pressing into the weight of the plough. Women clear gardens, pulling dead stalks, planting herbs and vegetables once more. Children scatter, their laughter bright as they splash through puddles, chasing one another between furrows. The air is damp, heavy with the scent of soil, but it is alive, filled with the promise of renewal. Spring labor is relentless. The earth, softened by thaw, must be broken open, turned furrow by furrow. The seeds are pressed into the soil, each one an act of hope. The peasants know that storms, droughts, or pests could undo their work in an instant, but still they sow, for to sow is to survive. Their hands blister, their backs ache, but the rhythm carries them. Days lengthen, shadows shift, and the village hums with effort. Meals are plain bread, onions, thin ale, but each bite fuels another hour of labor. In the evenings, the villagers return weary, yet with a faint pride that the fields are sown, the earth entrusted once more with their future. Summer brings fullness. The fields ripple with green, stalks swaying in warm breezes, the hum of insects constant. The air is thick with life, birds calling, bees buzzing, cattle lowing. The cottages spill open, their doors wide, their windows unshuttered, life moving between hearth and lane with ease. Women sit outside with their spindles, spinning wool as they watch children chase geese across the yard. Men mend fences, sharpen tools, guide oxen to pasture. The smith's forge glows hot, the clang on iron ringing sharp against the hum of life. Days are long, yet the work stretches to fill them, the sun setting only after backs are bent and hands blistered. The forest, lush and heavy with leaves, offers its own bounty. Children gather berries, staining their mouths red and purple. Women collect herbs, their knowledge of each leaf and root guiding them. Men cut timber, axes biting into trunks, the smell of sap and resin filling the air. Yet even in the richness of summer, there is unease. A single storm can flatten the fields, heavy rains can rot the grain, drought can crack the soil. Each day is watched carefully, the sky studied, the air tested for signs. Hope mingles with fear, for abundance is never guaranteed. Autumn arrives with color and urgency. The trees blaze in reds and golds, the air cool and sharp, the fields heavy with grain. Harvest begins at dawn and stretches until dusk, every hand needed. Sickles flash in the sun, sheaves of wheat are gathered, cart. Under the weight of bundles, the barns fill slowly, their shadows deepening as stacks rise higher. The work is exhausting, bodies bent and blistered, but it is also joyful. Each sheaf stored is security, each cart filled a promise against the hunger of winter. When the harvest is gathered, the village celebrates. Fires are lit, tables set with bread, cheese, meat, and ale. Songs rise into the cool night air, rough but strong, carrying across fields now stripped bare. Dances circle. Children's laughter ringing as they run between the dancers. For a single night, burdens are forgotten, replaced by the warmth of community, by gratitude for survival. The feast is not merely joy, it is defiance against the hardships to come, a declaration that the village endures. And then winter comes again. The fields fall silent, the forest grows still, the days shorten. The cottages close, their shutters drawn, their hearths glowing in the long dark. Inside, the rhythm slows. Women's and weave by firelight, men mend tools, children huddle beneath blankets, elders tell stories that weave memory into myth. Hunger presses close, illness creeps in the shadows, but the fire burns, and with it burns the will to endure. Through all of this, the sowing, the reaping, the feasting, the fasting, the living and the dying, the village remains. Generations rise and fall, their names fading, their faces forgotten, yet their labor builds the foundation of everything beyond them. They do not know of history as we know it, do not imagine themselves as part of stories to be told centuries later. They know only the soil beneath their feet, the fire in their hearths, the faces of their kin. And yet it is through their silence, their endurance, their countless ordinary days, that history itself is made. Their footsteps vanish into the soil, their voices into the air, their lives into the turning of the seasons. But the echo remains, faint, steady, eternal, the heartbeat of humanity carried forward, one humble village, one unbroken rhythm at a time.